$3,347,000 to certain accounts for the benefit of the Metropolitan Police Department, state trial courts, Davidson County Election Commission, District Attorney, Public Defender, Municipal Auditorium, Board of Fair Commissioners, Nashville's Farmers Market, General Services, and Administrative Department. What we'll do to try to streamline this, I'll call each department head or director, and if you have any questions, they'll come to the podium. If not, we'll move on to the next one. So we'll start with the Public Defender. I'm sorry, you're exactly right. And duly seconded. Discussion. We have discussion. So first one I want to call is Public Defender's Office, Ms. Diener, or someone representing the Public Defender's Office. Is there anyone that'd like to question, anyone in the queue to question Public Defender's Office? Any questions? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on. District Attorney's Office. Mr. Glenn Funk? Are there any questions for the appropriations for the District Attorney's Office? Seeing none, thank you for being here, Mr. Funk. State Trial Courts. Mr. Townsend, are there any members of council that would like to ask State Trial Courts any questions? Council Lady Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but just sitting on the Budget and Finance and the idea that they've come down before the people, they have the opportunity before the council, they're on TV. If they just would like to give a 2 or 3 minute update, I think it would be a good use of time, the fact that they've come down. And I don't have any questions, but if it's just something that they would want to share, I would just hate to see them come down here on this specific day, be on TV, come before the council, and not be able to share anything.
Well, I'll be glad to ask them if they would like to share anything.
Yeah, definitely.
If not, then we'll move on.
Okay.
Mr. Townsend, would you like to have, do you have any comments to wish to share?
Fine, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend.
The people on TV don't know.
Okay, Municipal Auditorium. Are there any questions concerning Municipal Auditorium? And we do have some. And Mr. Bob Scone, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to make a statement prior to the questions, feel free to do so.
I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can help us with.
All right, Councilman Glover.
Yeah, just briefly, last year when we were going through the budget process, we had basically talked to several of the departments that are revenue generating, such as yours, and I thought we were pretty much so given assurances that we wouldn't be asked for any supplemental appropriations this year. Maybe I misunderstood. So if I could just ask you to tell me, I guess, what went wrong, and are we anticipating it not happening in the future?
Thank you, Councilman. It is always our goal to try and break even at least, but I did not make any promises on our department's behalf that we would break even. We only project a revenue stream of what we can project into the upcoming fiscal year, and that's why I'm here standing before you asking for a subsidy, because we're shortfalled on our revenues this year, and also and some of our expenses have been overspended. So
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Mendez.
Just to follow up on that question, I guess not having been here at budget time last year, was the projection a year ago to be able to break even this year?
No, I did not make that projection. What we do is we project what we think we can take in for revenue. We try and stay within those that revenue projection, which ends up being our expenses, and therefore we're here tonight to handle a gap between not only a shortfall on our revenue projections, but also a shortfall, an overspending of some expenses.
So could you discuss a little bit about the causes of the shortfall from what the revenue you projected, and also talk a little bit about why the expenses were higher?
Well, some of the events didn't perform as well as we had hoped. A lot of times early in the year, when we're sitting here over a year and a half ago now, trying to project what events we'll book, if they'll come through, and then if they perform as well as we hope that they would. Some of them didn't this year, and some of our bigger events just didn't pan out as much as we hoped to, and didn't get some of the events that we hoped to have also. So it is a little bit, it's a dicey game sometimes in the entertainment business, which is mostly what we're in. Some of our expenses, we recoup most of our expenses on the shows, but then there's a lot of upkeep to the facility, that we maintain the facility in a good, orderly, and a safe fashion.
Is there a plan to be able to do a better job of projecting how shows are going to do that you book?
That I wish I could find, but as you can understand, I don't know how many people are going to come to a certain show when we book a tour and things like that. We can guesstimate the best we can, and that's what we do at the beginning of each fiscal year.
So this is a little bit unfair because I represent a downtown venue in my legal career, so I actually have a pretty good idea of how that projecting works. And it seems like you ought to be able to project pretty accurately for at least 90% of your shows, and it might be just a handful that are harder to project. I guess I would really like to see you, not you, the auditorium, figure out a way to do a better job of projecting. This is a pretty significant shortfall, and for at least speaking for myself, I don't know that it's acceptable to just say, well, who knows who's going to show up. I think there are professionals out there that will help the auditorium be able to zone in on what kind of shows it ought to be getting and how many people ought to be showing up.
Are you relating to like concerts and things like that? Concerts, what we do?
Whatever the bookings are.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not picking at what the gross revenue is. I'm just picking at being able to project accurately. And, on the scale of the budget for the auditorium, the amount of the shortfall and then being over on expenses seems excessive to me anyway. Thank you for being here, though.
You're welcome.
Seeing no others, thank you, Ms. Scone.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you being here. Next will be General Services and Administration. Are there any questions for General Services Administration? Would someone does anyone from General Services wish to speak? If not, nope. Thank you very much for being here. Next would be the Board of Fair Commissioners. Mr. Sanders, are there any questions for the Fair Board of Commissioners? Seeing none, Mr. Sanders, do you have any remarks you'd like to make? If not, thank you very much. Next would be Nashville Farmers Market. Are there any questions? Yes, there are. Ms. Kennard, would appreciate you stepping up to the podium. Would you like to make a statement before we begin, or would you like to just go right into the questions?
Well, I'm happy to be here tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same basic question. Here we have a revenue-producing property. The lease payment went down drastically. It was our understanding there wouldn't be, again, subsidies that were asked for, and I can't recall the exact conversation, but the part that's most confusing to me is that here we are a few months out, and we're a considerable amount of money is being asked for the farmers market. So it's my understanding, Mr. Jameson, that under state law, the way there's a clause in there that basically we have to go ahead and subsidize this and keep it afloat, for lack of a better word.
Contract, correct.
Okay, and how long is our lease there?
It's in 20-year renewable periods, I believe. I'll double check that.
Okay. What is our lease amount that we're paying now?
Is it 10? No, sorry.
It's $10.
I'll let Mr. Berry.
There are 40 years left on the lease,
20-year renewal term, then a second renewal term for 20 years.
Okay, and the lease amount is how much?
$10.
A year?
A year.
Okay. Well, I can tell you, as a business operator, if I only had to pay $10 a year for my lease, I'd be ecstatic. And so I keep trying to figure out why exactly we're literally spending this amount of money of taxpayer dollars on something that should be at least breaking even, if not making a little bit of money. So I'll hush and let you explain and help me try and understand.
I appreciate your concern, Councilmember. I do want to state that we are not projecting to be over our expenses of $1.73 million. The subsidy that we're requesting is due to a revenue shortfall. That revenue shortfall is made up of approximately $147,000 of year-over-year revenue loss, and the balance of it, which is $690,000, was to be incremental revenue that the market would be able to obtain with capital improvements that were not made to the market during this fiscal year. So when we presented to you last spring our budget for this current year, we presented to you a budget that included significant capital improvements that would allow the market to increase year-round occupancy. As you know, we're a very seasonal business. This would eliminate some of the seasonality of our business, and it would also provide anchor tenants that would stabilize the revenue towards our financial self-sufficiency plan. So we are still working towards our financial self-sufficiency plan, but as we all know, the market also just received a lease amendment that this body approved just a few weeks ago that amended 4.77 acres from our property. So the plan that our board and our staff have been working on for the past 4 years is now having to go through an update because we're now having to increase our revenue opportunities with less leasable space. It is a big fix. It is not a 2-year problem. It's a 20-year problem that the market has been facing since it was built there in 1995. The market has not been profitable, and it is something that our board and our staff are very committed to overcoming, but it is going to take some time now that we're also dealing with less leasable space. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about some of the things that we're looking to do to overcome that hurdle.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Pridemore. Last week, I don't know, maybe it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, a lady came from the farmer's market and she shared with us that she was concerned because she felt as if let me clarify that she is a vendor down there. Mm-hmm. And she clarified she had been there for many years and that you had asked her to leave, but she was concerned because she said she's not clear about the standards. And so I was just wondering if you could explain what the standards are. And I think she had shared, I think some of the questions that we had asked before about a lot of the spaces still being vacant, but yet you're saying that you don't have enough leasable space, but she's saying that there's a lot of spaces at the farmer's market that are very vacant. And I know I go down there quite a bit, and I've experienced them being vacant. So if you could just explain, when you say there's not enough leasable space, what that is, and what the criteria is, and why you would ask someone to leave that has been there for several years.
So I think there are a couple questions, and I'm going to try to tackle them one at a time. So one, I believe you're speaking about by Cynthia, who's been a merchant at the farmer's market for a little over 3 years. She is a wonderful merchant. She's got wonderful products. She reapplied to the market this year. We reviewed her application. We followed up with her on her application and asked her about her packaging, because as you all know, we're losing the area of the market that has been our craft and flea area. And in order not to displace our craft and flea merchants, we've been working for the past 6 months to transition them into the south side of the market. And in doing so, there are some things that we need to do to make sure that their products and the agricultural products can take place in the same setting. And I know, Nancy, your experience running a farmer's market, you might understand this. When you're dealing with aromas, such as incense or oils or perfumes, it's very important in a farmer's market that those scents are contained. so that they don't have any adverse effects on the shoppers or on the food products or other vendors that are doing business around them. That's a very common practice with farmers markets across the country. In fact, most farmers markets don't allow those types of products to be sold, and we do. It's something that our customers have asked for, so it's something that we've continued to allow. So this particular merchant, Cynthia, we reviewed her application, we met with her, I reviewed her products, I went to her booth on a Saturday morning and actually reviewed each one of her products. We talked about how she could contain her potpourri that she wanted to sell, and we approved it. We then allowed her to book space. She booked space the next weekend. She did not utilize her space that weekend. I believe she met with you after that. And she was there this weekend. I met with her several times this weekend. She had a line around her booth. She seemed to be very happy. She sold a lot of product. So we did allow her to come back. I do think there's a little bit of misinformation that you may have, or maybe she spoke to you before she came back to the market. But I do think that particular situation is resolved. In terms of our merchant standards, our board developed merchant standards that were implemented last year in January of 2015. That was the first time that the Nashville Farmers Market had a written document stating what type of merchants could do business at the market. And there's a lot of interpretation about those, but they're written, they're included in our application, they're posted on our website. We have annual meetings every year where we go through it. We have one-on-one coaching sessions with our merchant community to answer their questions, and we have quarterly meetings with our merchants. They're very, very clear. In fact, it outlines what's prohibited and what's allowed. We leave very little room for interpretation there because we understand that gray can be confusing. We are trying very hard to work with our existing and our new merchant community to help them understand the rules and adapt. We're also working very hard to help those that are migrating to the South Side to understand the difference between doing business in just a craft and flea experience and doing business with agricultural products. And so far, I think we're making good progress. I believe your last question was about space. So the Nashville Farmers Market, it's a lot of space. We've got a lot of stalls. Each one of our sheds has 48 10 by 20 spaces inside of it. Some of those are not leasable spaces because we have to have walkways. We have our merchant map complete that will take effect on May 7th, and it will run through November 30th. And we, based on commitments that have been made to the market, on Saturdays you can anticipate to see a 100% full market. In fact, we had to shrink the amount of space we allowed so that we could add booths going down the center. That's one of the ways that we're trying to increase our revenue, is create new leasable space at the market. Most people that shop at a farmer's market tend to go on Saturdays. We're different. We're one of 12 markets throughout the country that are multi-day markets, and we're 7 days a week. Most farmers have to be on their farm at some point during the week to be able to grow and harvest their products. So we have 6 farmers that participate with us from May through November, 7 days a week. And then the rest of our farmers are either single day on Saturdays or weekend. We then fill in the spaces with food artisans and craft and flea. This year we're anticipating having close to 150 merchants participating at the market during peak season. And then after November, we go into our winter market where we focus more closely on the weekend business. And the sheds will be primarily used for events or they'll be empty for maintenance during the week. I know that was a lot of information, so if you have follow-up questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Stand by. Council Lady Dow.
I just had a quick question. He spoke about that we have 4 years left on our lease. Are you able to provide information about if we wanted to terminate it early? And then the second question I had, I just want to bring up one thing that was said, that the market has not been profitable for some time. And I think as we go into the budget season, we need to take that under consideration, whether we're operating a farmer's market or a small business venue, selling artisan type things, because this space is paid for by the taxpayers of this city, but it's not open to everybody in the city to participate. And what we heard last week was that people of color specifically people of color, have been put out of the market. They've been intimidated and told not to come back. And so I think that is something of concern that we need to look at and address. How many vendors have left the market and for what reason, why? And so that's specifically what was said. It was said when I was chair of the Farmers Market Fair Board and Codes Committee, and unfortunately I failed to address it as I should. But I do think that as we go into the budget season, we do need to take a deep dive and evaluate what's happening at the farmers market, make sure everybody understands the vision of the farmers market, that is clear to all the vendors there, it's clear to all the people in the city, all of us on council, what homemade, handmade, and homegrown is, and make sure that if this is a space that taxpayers are going to pay for, that it's open and available to all the people, and if it's not, then it's communicated in a way that they're not intimidated and they don't feel offended if they're not able to come down there and sell their products. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. I want to kind of echo to a degree that same sentiment there, but I guess greater as we, it's my understanding we really don't have a choice on this. We've got to fund this based on the lease agreement that we have with the state. Correct, Mr. Jameson?
I know we're required to have an operable farmer's market. Mr. Berry has some information regarding the termination provision.
Okay.
There's a mutual cancellation clause in the lease upon 6 months' notice by either party. So the state could actually take the property away from us. With regards to the North Shed, they didn't want to take the whole property, but they wanted to take the North Shed for use by the new Tennessee State Museum. And there is provisions in the lease, if they do a partial taking, that they would have to pay us an appraised value based on the land and certain formulas that are in the lease.
Okay. Well, given where we are in this time of the year, I kind of feel held hostage here that we're going to have to fund this today. But as we go forward into the next budget process, Mr. Chair, what I would like to see is a break-even budget, one that's realistic, where they know what the ground rules are now. They know the $10 lease payment. They know all of these things. So if they need to cut expenses or whatever else they have to do there, as we go forward, I really don't think we need to be subsidizing something that's only paying $10 for a lease. And so if we could, I'd like to echo what Council Lady Dow says. I'd like to see a plan as we come into this next budget season that will not require any supplemental income from us. Thank you.
And that process will begin in the next few weeks, so thank you. Seeing no others in the queue, I'm sorry, Ms. Kennard, you'd like to speak?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind. Thank you. I would like to address something that was said earlier. You know, I've come up here a few times, and I apologize if I get a little upset when I say this. I took on this job knowing that something was broken and it needed to be fixed. I'm going to try to compose myself, as I really do not think it's very professional for you to come up here and do what just happened. I have been inclusive. I have been fair. I have worked harder than anyone would to try to open the doors of the Nashville Farmers Market for everyone. I met with 17 Nepali farmers last week with a translator and taught them for 2 hours how to go to market. I'm sponsoring them personally out of my checkbook to sell at the Nashville Farmers Market, to give them an opportunity. We are not discriminating. I want to be very, very clear. We are not discriminating at the Nashville Farmers Market. And if anyone on my staff is or on my board is, I will take care of it. But we are not. There has been a culture at the Nashville Farmers Market for generations, not recently, that when a merchant is unhappy about their placement or about their opportunities, they have come to you and they have told you that they are being discriminated against. It is not true under my watch. I cannot speak to what has occurred prior to me, but I can speak to each one of you and look you in the eye and tell you what type of person I am and what type of organization I'm running on behalf of the citizens of this city. And I will not stand up here and be told that I'm a
Ms.
racist.
Kennard, I've given you some leeway.
I'm
on
sorry,
that.
sir, but
We'll stick to, we're professional
I agree.
text, and we'd appreciate.
But it feels like that.
I understand, but we're discussing your budget, your supplemental budget, so I would appreciate you keeping to that topic.
I apologize, sir, and I do apologize. I know I'm emotional, but thank you for your time.
Stand by. Council Lady Gilmore, Bill Pridemore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to follow up and just give a little background, and I feel like it does tie with the budget, because when we experienced this last year, and we said that we would not need she shared that the director of the farmers market shared that she would not need a supplement. And last year, when we held meetings, there were a lot of vendors at that time that were pushed out for whatever reason. So I would just like to hear more about the criteria, and I would like for her to, she doesn't have to explain all of it, but I do think that there needs to be more clarity, because when we say local, it's my understanding local could be apples from Washington State. Local could be as close as farmers growing organic products. And I think there's not clarity there that perhaps make people feel like they're being discriminated against. And I think the issue is, if we're approving the budget, it's not whether you are or you are not. When our constituents come to us, whoever they may be, if they're citizens and they're participating and we're approving this budget, we need to be able to say without a doubt, this is the criteria, this is clear, and that there's no room for that. So I do think there needs to be more clarity in that.
Well, I will answer to that. They have a policy, a rental policy, a policy set forth in writing, so I'm sure that they could provide that for you, but I don't.
Okay, that's I guess
now.
Okay, and maybe she can come back.
If she can provide that to you,
I've seen it. I guess the point is my point is the clarity about what's local, whether it's 3 miles, and then sometimes it can be 100 miles, is not clear.
I thank you, and if you want to, you can discuss that with her. However, during the budget process, you're more than welcome to address that, and that's less than a month away. So,
And Mr. Chair, I thank you for the engagement and the opportunity to speak, but I just want to say on behalf of my constituents, I have to say that they must be feeling that they've been treated with integrity and not being discriminated against if I approve this budget, and that's all I'm saying, and it's not directed towards anyone. Thank you.
thank you. Council Lady Vercher.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say that the discourse regarding this conversation, can you remind everyone how they need to address this body, proper protocol and tone? They need to be reminded that we're here to serve this city. This isn't about personal attacks. This is about taking care of the business of this city.
Thank you, Council Lady Vercher. I normally do that, but since this being a committee meeting, we try to give a little more leeway, because there sometimes emotions do get a little riled, but thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Council Lady Weiner.
This may be a little too late, but we have before us a bill that basically obligates us to honor a lease agreement that we have with the state, which is to fund this budget. My opinion is that if we have any concerns about what's going on at the farmers market, we need to look at that during the future budget hearings that are to come. And if we need to look at structuring how this entity can best utilize taxpayer money in a fee-appropriate way or in a revenue-generating way, then we need to look maybe out of the box at accessibility to a location that makes sense, that will bring more people to the facility, as well as how it's actually structured. So I'm just suggesting that this be punted to our budget process. And in terms of operations, I suggest that every council member take some time to visit with Ms. Kennard, to visit with the people at the farmers market and to really get a deep dive, if you will, into what goes on there and exactly what the issues are so that you can come to these budget hearings with that mindset, and then we can move forward in making this correction if there needs to be one.
Thank you, Council Lady. Seeing no others in the queue, all in favor of RS 2016-172, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're going to move over to RS 2016-205. Sponsors Pridemore, authorizes the Department of Law to compromise and settle the two distinct wage and hour class actions claims brought by Vonda Knoll on behalf of herself and all Davidson County Sheriff's Office employees against the Metropolitan Government in the amount of $199,936.25 for the Fair Labor Standards Act class, and in the amount of $1,900,000 for the Rule 23 unpaid wages class. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing some. Councilman Pulley.
Yes, sir. I've got a few questions here. I'd like to start with Mr. Cooper, if I could, with legal. The first question I have for you is, I know that this resolution and the settlement that has been offered has probably got some time constraint with it, so I don't know what the appetite would be to defer this any longer than we have now. But it concerns me that we have this thing that's ongoing for 4 years and been litigated and is going through an appellate process, and we get it for 5 days and we have to rule on it. Is there any way we can get this stuff earlier than what's been provided to us absent a deferral?
Well, the settlement was not finally negotiated until I believe the 1st of April, and so we filed it once we got the settlement agreement in place. The settlement agreement from the plaintiffs was conditioned upon it being approved by the council in April. I personally I would agree to an extension, but it's really up to plaintiffs' counsel because they conditioned the settlement upon its approval in April.
And doesn't that impact the court to some degree?
The court would have to sign off on the settlement before it is finalized. The court can't get the settlement until the council approves it first because we would not have the authority to submit it. So yes, it would delay the court considering the settlement potentially.
All right, well, I'll just move forward with my questions here, and we'll consider that later. I know everybody's had the analysis and been able to sift through it, so I wonder if you could give us a sort of a Cliff Notes version of the two distinct issues here, the FLSA component and the unjust enrichment component of this lawsuit.
Sure. So the lawsuit was originally filed in 2012, and it was filed in federal court for an alleged violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. This concerns a class of correctional officers, and regarding the FLSA alleged violation, they alleged that they were sometimes required to work past the end of their shift. Many were working 8.5-hour shifts, but they could not go home until count clear was complete, meaning the next shift comes in and they have to make sure that all of the inmates are where they're supposed to be. And so the allegation was that sometimes officers would have to stay over a little bit before being able to leave, and that they were not compensated for that time. Well, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you have to pay employees for the time that they are working. So that was the original claim. Several months later, the plaintiffs amended their complaint to allege a separate and distinct state law claim, a breach of contract and unjust enrichment claim. And so that really had nothing to do with holding over from a shift. It had to do with how their pay was calculated, interpretation of the pay plan, and how it's reflected on the pay stub. The pay plan, all Metro employees are part of a pay plan that the council approves each year. For correctional officers, starting in year 2000, a change was made to make correctional officers their own pay class in the pay plan. Inadvertently, apparently, language that clarified that they were salaried employees and therefore the hourly rates listed in the pay plan were not reflective of the actual hours they work. That language did not get included as it applies to correctional officers. It was apparently a mistake at the time, and it just never got cleared up. So the plaintiffs allege that because they work more than 40-hour weeks, that they should be paid the rate, the pay plan hourly rate that was listed for all of the hours they work. Metro's position is that they are salaried employees, not hourly, and that the hourly rates that are shown in the pay plan are just based on a 40-hour week. Just kind of, that's the way our system was set up, and that's how it breaks it down, based upon a 40-hour week. So the plaintiffs claim that Metro had been unjustly enriched because they were not being paid that hourly rate for all of their hours worked. That ended up going to trial in August of 2015, and a jury determined that in the jury's opinion, they were, Metro had been unjustly enriched. So after that, we went to mediation again, and although we did not reach a settlement at mediation, we continued discussions, and within a few weeks of that mediation are bringing forward this agreement.
So the crux of the issue here is, what is Metro's contention? Your contention is that the correctional officers are salaried?
Absolutely.
And the plaintiff's contention is that they're hourly?
Yes, sir. That's the key.
That's the key differentiation, because they work more than 40 hours a week, evidently, or more than 8 hours a shift. So what's reflected in the pay plan, both the hourly and the annual rate?
Yes, starting in 2000, you had the hourly rate and the annual rate. Without that language that clarified that the hourly rates shown are not indicative of the actual hours worked. So that's just based on a 40-hour week. In 2012 or 13, the council amended the pay plan to add that language back in as it applies to correctional officers. In the court's opinion, that was not enough to cut off damages, so the council came back the next year and amended the pay plan to take out the hourly rates altogether. So the existing pay plan that's in place for this fiscal year does not have the hourly rates.
Who administers the pay plan?
Well, it's kind of a combination of Metro HR and Finance.
So Metro, HR, and Finance administer this plan, not the sheriff's office. Is that right?
That is correct. The Fair Labor Standards Act portion, that concerned more with how the sheriff's office was operating in their timekeeping system. But this unjust enrichment portion of the claim, the vast majority of the settlement was not attributable to anything that the sheriff's office did.
What is a paycheck? If I were to look at one of their check stubs, what would it reflect?
If you look at it today, it will reflect the hourly rate for the hours that they actually work. If you looked at it at the time this lawsuit was filed up through recently, up through this year, it would show the hourly rate based upon 40 hours a week.
So do you think that's somewhat confusing?
Yes, it absolutely was confusing. We have that issue rectified now going forward, but yes, I will agree it was confusing.
All right, so do you believe Metro's at fault?
I do not believe that Metro did anything legally wrong. I think Metro was, sloppy isn't the right word. Metro's system was not at a place that it needed to be when it, as far as calculating the pay and showing that on the pay stub. So I think we're guilty of causing some confusion, but I don't think we did anything legally wrong. Now, the jury felt otherwise. They felt that we had been unjustly enriched and therefore should compensate the plaintiffs.
That's what the jury's opinion is. Your opinion is that we just were sloppy in the language of how the pay plan was written. Is that the way I'm understanding this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And we've made those changes?
Correct.
But you don't believe we did anything wrong?
I do not believe we did anything wrong. Now, like I said, the jury determined otherwise. They did not buy our argument that we were not unjustly enriched, that the correctional officers were paid what they should have been paid.
So because this is a business decision on your part, knowing that we might be exposed, that's why we're settling the lawsuit?
Correct.
Are any other departments operate like this?
The facts of this case they're limited to correctional officers. You know, they are their own pay class, and they have their own schedules that are distinct from other departments.
Based on your examination of the facts here and your knowledge of the other departments, do you believe we're exposed in any other way with the police department or the fire department or any other departments like this?
I do not know enough about how those other departments operate to say for sure at this point.
Okay. So you believe
there is no other claim or no other litigation regarding any other departments.
Okay. All right. Can I ask Sheriff Hall some questions?
Certainly. Sheriff Hall, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Sheriff. Let me ask you about the FLSA component of this lawsuit. Can you tell me the Cliff Notes version of what went on there to precipitate this?
Yes, sir. We have two sets of shifts, or we had two sets of shifts, 12-hour shifts and 8.5-hour shifts. Believe it or not, we're probably the only place in the country that did that. We allowed our employees to vote in a way to keep retention higher. If you wanted 8.5 hours, you worked in certain facilities, and 12-hour shifts worked in the other facilities. The way we've always worked in our line of work is I'm at work until you arrive, and I need someone to replace me, and then you need someone to replace you, and that whole officer's assignment has to be filled 24 hours a day. We call, what we've always done, our business is really to account for inmates. That's what this job is about. And so we count those inmates periodically throughout the day and every shift change. And so our information system records the counting of the inmate. We count inmates, we record the fact that they're all present. That occurs as shifts are changing. In this case, what has happened is, let's just say that the shift were to end at 3 o'clock today. We close that shift when the count clears. We count every inmate we're responsible for in this area, and when my count clears, I hand the shift over to you. That was recorded as the shift ending. There are times when an inmate's in court, at the hospital, or downstairs, or recreation, or other places. And so if the count didn't clear, the only record we had that kept you at work was when that count finally clears on that shift. Oftentimes 5 minutes, 7 minutes were some of these cases. What is unfortunate about it, in my opinion, is impossible for us to disprove this fact, but I have been there 25 years. My window stares at the sidewalk, and these same officers that are oftentimes, if the count didn't clear, were held over for 4 minutes or 5 minutes. I would guess 80 to 85% of the time, they're allowed to leave when count clears early, 5 or 4 or 7 minutes or 3 minutes. It's always very close. But there's no way to prove that individual was allowed to leave early. That just tells you when count cleared. And so historically, we've never had a time clock. People may ask that question. I've been there a long, long time. Our posts are all over Nashville. We have officers working in the hospital right now. We have some driving vans. We have some in jails. And so it's not as simple as an assembly line might be where you go in and punch a clock. And we have put some things in place. I'm sure this will be a question about how we would fix it or what have we done. First thing we did was we allowed the democracy to kind of go back into what's best for the agency. Voting for what shift doesn't really work for the agency, or in this case led to some problems. So we're putting everybody on 12-hour shifts. We did that about a year ago. Everyone's on one standard shift. The other thing is when I arrive on my post now, I must record that I'm here via the technology that we have on post. And then when I leave, that's the record that I'm leaving my shift. And so it's literally how long I'm at work, wherever I'm assigned. And so it's been a difficult thing for us. Yes, there are people, and I agree with this settlement, there are people that at times when shift didn't clear or count didn't clear, that record is how long they had to stay, because quite frankly, we can't let anyone go till we know where everyone is. What is not documented and is well known by those of us who run the organization is a vast majority of the time that count was clearing early, but we can't prove that because there was no way to prove when you actually left work. And that's the difficulty as it relates to running the organization, and I take responsibility for that. There's nothing I can say.
So you normally, under this practice, cleared the count early unless there was an inmate problem, being out in the infirmary or whatever. So the normal practice was to clear the count early.
Yes, we take great pride in that. That's really what we're trying to do, is make sure everyone is here. And when those exceptions to the rule occurred, count didn't clear on time, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, then that record shows past your shift time that you were still at work. What is not proven is all those times that you were clearly 5 minutes, 7 minutes before shift that was a clear count.
So when you clear the count early, the correctional officer is able to leave his shift early as well. So
yes, sir.
If it's cleared 10 minutes until the end of the shift, then he gets out and gets a 10-minute head start home.
Yes, sir.
If he's 5 minutes late, then he has to stay there an extra 5 minutes. And Mr. Cooper, this is a question for you. So once you violate this law, you violated it, and you can't balance that out with leaving early and staying late. Is that correct?
I think the issue was there was no way to prove that occurred. I mean, there was no documentation to show that they left early to balance it out.
So you just kind of operated under this gentleman's agreement that you can leave early when the count clears, but you have to stay late if it doesn't clear until this time. And about how much of a percentage of the time did the guys get to leave early? Guys being a generic term.
I'm very comfortable saying 85% of the time would not be exaggerated. They were leaving early. I used to call it the stampede down the sidewalk. Shift ended at 3:30. You get run over at 3:18 to 3:20.
Okay, but you have put in measures to rectify that based on the new system that you're operating under. It's 12-hour shifts, so there's always overlap? Is that right?
Yeah, 12-hour shifts is easier for our administrative process because you have, keep in mind, we're talking about 600 employees or so all over Nashville, and so they're all on the same shift. That helps our administrative staff, and then we're putting together this automated system that we have, and we're rolling it out in the next 6 months, which will require everyone to be and leave at the same time, something we've been working on since this case really started.
Okay. Now let's move to the other side of the suit, the unjust enrichment portion. How many hours, I understand you work on like a 28-day cycle, is that right?
Yes, sir.
How many hours a week during the time period in question did the correctional officers work, or total during the 28-day cycle?
Okay, so that's a tricky question. Here's the way it works. I like to say it this way. It's a little easier, I think. The way the FLSA exemption for correctional officers, all law enforcement, by the way, works is that you're not required to pay overtime for your employees until you reach actually 171 work hours. That's the federal number. And so if you do the math of 8.5-hour shifts times, is it 20, I think it is, shifts? You add that up, and then that gets them to 170. And so what that means is if you work every 20 shifts in this 28-day period, if you work 8.5 hours, you're going to hit the 170 mark, and we don't owe 1 penny for overtime as long as you work every minute you're scheduled to. What throws everybody off is that most people are used to 40-hour work weeks, and so when you get to your 41 or 42 or 50 hours in a week, that means nothing as it relates to the law enforcement exemption in the FLSA. And so 8.5 hours doesn't really mean overtime. 20 hours in one shift doesn't mean overtime, but 171 is the benchmark at the federal level, and that's what confuses people. So we work 20 shifts of 8.5 hour, or how many shifts? 12-hour shifts when we were doing both.
So that usually came out to 168 or 170,
Yes.
depending upon what shift you were on.
Yes, sir.
When you hired a correctional officer, was that their understanding of what their job was? And was their annual salary as articulated on the pay plan what you discussed with them in terms of what their salary would be?
Yes, I need to give the disclaimer, though, that the pay plan piece of this case really has very little to do with us, but I can truly explain how we deal with that in the court case.
My question is simply, was that the expectation of your correctional officers?
Yeah, we advertise salary. We're going to pay you if you'll come here. We recruit you in at that salary. Hourly is not discussed.
Excuse me, Sheriff and Councilman, Mr. Jameson would like to speak for a moment, if you don't
Go
mind.
ahead.
Councilman Pulley, you're doing a phenomenal job of asking excellent questions. I am reminded of Operation Desert Storm, where CNN got into trouble because they would ask Commander Schwarzkopf questions that the press should ask about our military. But it got very detailed to the point they were asking him tactical, maneuverable questions. This is pending litigation, and if for whatever reason this council doesn't approve it or approves only half of it, if you ask a lot of strategic questions, the plaintiffs' counsels are not idiots, and they'll make note of it, particularly since it's recorded, and just keep that in mind as you delve appropriately, but more sensitively deeper into the specifics.
I think I came close to crossing that line.
No.
Continue on, Councilman.
All right, let me see if I can rephrase that question. Do you think you did anything wrong here, Sheriff Hall?
I think we could do a much better job on the FLSA piece. That's the sheriff's office's responsibility. We need to fix that. We are fixing that. I really don't have an opinion on the other one. The administration and legal department settled that. That's their proposal in front of you. It is their pay plan. We obviously live there, but I just don't want to cross that line as it relates to their decision about bringing this forward to you guys. I totally supported the other part of that. Quite frankly, keep in mind, the amount of money that you're talking about settling with the officers is $45,000. $155,000 of that is the legal fees that are mounting because it's a federal case, and so that's the reason over 2 years ago I said let's do that as a proposal. As it relates to the other one, that's really the administration's decision. I do not believe the sheriff is doing anything wrong as it relates to the $1.9 million thing.
I thank you. And just to be clear, pay plans are administered by Finance Department and somebody else, not your
Yes,
office.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I'm sure others have plenty more questions, so I'll let everybody else have a bite at this apple. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. Councilman Glover.
This is to Mr. Cooper. I just want to understand, because Councilman Pulley did ask the question if we deferred this, but you said the understanding or the agreement is that this has to be settled in April. Is there any financial potential for any greater financial loss if the move was made to defer this and then we come back in May and discuss it?
Only if plaintiff's counsel was not willing to extend the agreement. And then if the settlement fell apart, then potentially you could be looking at more if this plays all the way out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Mendez.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Cooper. I don't need the details because you gave a lot of details to Councilman Pulley, but I just want to confirm that you feel like Metro has looked at the circumstances and the ambiguity that caused this litigation in the first place, and that those concerns and ambiguities have been addressed to the fullest extent possible?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Council Lady Vercher.
Thank you, Chair. The sheriff alluded to that there was a delay in settling this. Can we get some background as to why there was a delay?
Sure. So the original claim was for the Fair Labor Standards Act violation. Then you had this secondary unjust enrichment claim that kind of took legs, wings, took off on its own. So we came to an agreement on the Fair Labor Standards Act portion of the claim a couple years ago. However, this other portion was still out there, and because the amount of money potentially was so great that we did not come to a settlement at the time and went on to trial. The plaintiff's attorneys agreed, or I was not there at the time, but I think they felt it would be best if the FLSA portion, if that settlement basically we just hold off until the unjust enrichment portion is resolved and then consider everything together. Now, that may have been a joint decision between plaintiff's counsel and Metro Legal at the time. I'm not sure.
Does that answer the question? Thank you, Councilor Vercher. Sheriff, appreciate you being here. Appreciate you fielding the questions. Seeing there are no other questions in the queue, council members, all in favor of 2016-205, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-196, Pridemore and Van Reese, sponsors, accepts a grant from the State of Tennessee Arts Commission to the Metro Arts Commission to conduct community art projects in Davidson County. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-197, Pridemore and Gilmore sponsors, approves a grant from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency to the Social Services Commission to provide outreach and support to individuals living in encampments and connecting them with resources to move into permanent housing. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-198, Pridemore Murphy sponsors, approves an agreement between Metro and WGU Tennessee to assist with employee developmental goals by offering tuition discount to Metro government employees. Duly seconded. To have any discussion, Council Lady Gilmore. On last one, I didn't see it. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-199, Hunt, Pridemore, and Henderson sponsors, authorize the Director of Public Property to purchase property for use as a public park. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? And we do have a letter from the sponsor, by the way. All opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-200, Anthony Davis, Pridemore, and Elrod are sponsors, authorizes acquisition of 2 additional parcels for the construction of Gibson Creek Equalization Facility as part of the Clean Water Natural Overflow Abatement Program. We have a letter from Councilman Davis. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-201, Pridemore and Elrod sponsors, approves an agreement with the United States Department of Interior for the operation and upgrades of water quality monitors and flood warning gauges in fiscal year 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 on Mill Creek, Dry Creek, Browns Creek, Richland Creek, Whites Creek, Stones River, and Cumberland River. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. In discussion, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-123, Council Mendez and Gilmore are the sponsors, approves an amendment to number 8 to the Rutledge Hill redevelopment plan. So moved, duly seconded. Councilman Mendez.
Mr. Chair, with the passage of the tax increment financing bill on third reading at our last meeting, I would move to withdraw this bill.
Second.
Okay, motion been duly seconded for withdrawal. All in favor? Opposed? Been with, 2016-123 has been withdrawn. 2016-159, Councilman Cooper's sponsor amends Section 2.24.300 of Metro Code in regard to the Metro audit. We have a letter from Councilman Cooper requesting a indefinite deferral. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Seeing no in the queue for speaking, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. BL 2016-180, Councilman Bedney and Pridemore as sponsors, accepts a donation of $75,000 from Lennox Village 3 LLC to aid in construction of traffic improvements at the intersection of Nolensville Road and Benville Drive. I have a letter from the sponsor for approval. Duly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. BL 2016-181, Councilman Anthony Davis, Pridemore and Gilmore sponsors, approves a lease agreement between Metro Social Services Department, Metro Homelessness Commission, and City Road Chapel United Methodist Church for the use of additional office space. Do I have a motion? Duly seconded. Councilman Davis, you would like to speak? I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just saying I was very supportive of this. I know Pastor Voorhees has been working on it a while, and this is right on the border of our districts there, but very excited about the partnership, and hope everyone can support it.
Thank you. Seeing no others in the queue for discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2016-187, Councilman Syracuse, Pridemore and others, authorize the Director of Public Property Administration to execute a quitclaim deed for any property interest Metro government may have in a portion of the right-of-way of State Route 155 Bradley Parkway and McGavock Pike Interchange, and accepts consideration in the amount of $98,500. Duly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. I believe that concludes the agenda of the Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you for being here.